Awesome. So yeah, thrilled to be here, but first just thought we'd give a quick introduction to who we are. So I'm James, lovely to meet you all. I'm CEO and co-founder of Koto. So I started the business 8.5 years ago, but I spend my time in our London office mainly.
And I'm Dan. I am the ECD in London, so I manage the creative team in the London studio and run the kind of business there with our MD, Katie, who couldn't join us today. Hold me.
So I want to start off by thanking Yuriv for inviting us to speak here in Tel Aviv, a city that I always enjoy coming to, and to Sophie for the kind introduction. So yeah, as we heard in the start, we have 5 studios globally, so New York, Los Angeles, London, Berlin, and we just recently opened an office in Sydney, Australia to help with our expansion into APAC. And I think what I want to do is just quickly tell you a bit about Koto, and then we're going to talk about the way that we work with brands and clients, and hopefully give you some insight and be able to show about that. And then we're also going to have a space, I believe, at the end to ask any questions. So if you've got any questions, feel that. But I guess the best place to start is to talk about who we work with. So these are some of the brands that we're very lucky to work with on a global scale. And in each case, obviously, these are amazing companies that are well known, and so we feel incredibly entrusted to work on their brands, which are incredibly precious. But we also work with a ton of startups, both here in Israel and around the world, helping them get noticed and helping them build buzz around their brands. And I think, people sometimes see the big clients and think that we don't work with small clients, but we like to keep ourselves across this whole gamut. So we work with lots of startups, scale-ups, and established businesses such as Coca-Cola. And the 3 things that we mainly do for those people is we work with building their brands, building their digital experiences, and helping them with their campaigns so they can tell their stories to the world. But everything we do, doesn't matter where we're doing it in the world, doesn't matter who we're working with, starts with a problem, because that's what we like to do. We like to help people solve problems. And I think one of the biggest problems for anybody starting in this day and age is that there's infinite possibilities for your startup brand. There's a million different ways that we can look about approaching it. And our job is very much to help people navigate those challenges and give our experience and understand what they're trying to solve. Because ultimately we live in a world where a lot of people look the same. These are 15 different companies, and I'm sure if you looked at their websites, and I had this fear actually this morning, I was suddenly like, I hope none of those companies are in the room, because that might be awkward. But I'm sure if you looked at this website on its own, you would think, well, that's a great looking website. It has everything it needs. It speaks about it. But we have to think about context. We have to think about how people are experiencing our brands. And unfortunately, these guys have a lot of power. And so what they do, a lot of people copy because we love it, and it's a great brand, and they build stuff. And a lot of people turn up with a kind of weird copy of Apple. And this is a bit of a kind of silly joke I made on the plane on the way over here. But there is this formula that works. We talk about the product benefits. It's tasty, it's eaten by everyone, it's good for you. And these are the people that use it. But unfortunately, what's happening is that people are falling into a pattern. And our job is to help them break out of that pattern. So how do we go about fixing this? Ourselves at Koto, we have 3 things that we approach. The first thing is we look at things through an optimistic mindset. I think to build a strong brand takes positivity and perseverance. It's not going to be straightforward. There's going to be complications. It's hard. You have to get stakeholder alignment. You have to get people to believe in what you're trying to build. You have to push the same way. And our job as an outside team is to kind of work with people to help them go through those challenges, because change is hard. We don't like working for people. We like working with people. And what that means is it's about working as one team. You know, there's people that we've worked with in the room today, and I think we pride ourselves on understanding that we have to kind of meet in the middle and understand how we work together. And finally, I think you can't overlook the details. It's great to have a big idea. Big ideas make the world go round, but you have to craft all of those small details to make something truly unique. And so the place that we start is we always get to know our subject really well. And the only way to do that is to leave our desks. I think one of the things that's happened with COVID is it's very easy to be comfortable, to be at home, to log on to Zoom, to have everything digitally available to us. But I don't think you're really going to uncover the challenges to your problems unless you go and meet people face to face, unless you go and really understand and engage with people. And so we have quite a lot of air miles. We fly around the world quite a lot. We've been to some very, very obscure places and seen some very strange things. But in that process, you know, we've sung karaoke, we've delivered food as Uber Eats drivers, we've been Airbnb hosts, we have, like I said, been to places like Oklahoma, which I don't think I'm going back to. And in each of these cases, what it's doing is to try and get to the bottom, to uncover, to understand what's happening. Why is this company successful? What is its potential, and how are we going to work for them? And when we're working with companies, we're looking for three things, because we believe that these three things are vital for this company to be able to stand out in the thousands of choices that anyone has every day. So the first thing, it has to be true. The world of branding is not about making a fake veneer and putting this kind of gloss on top of something and kind of like tricking people. We have to find out what's special about your business, and every business has something special about it, otherwise it wouldn't exist. The second thing is we have to make it compelling. What's interesting, what's exciting, what is your audience motivations? How can we make it customer-centric? How can we understand the way that they think? And finally, it has to be distinctive. There's almost no one that we work with that doesn't have competitors. And you know, when you look at growing areas like AI, hundreds of companies being born every minute. How do you stand out in that space? What's the story you're trying to tell? And so that's very much our job. And why is navigating this so powerful? Well, I think there's a lot of stuff written out there about kind of investing in brand. And it's a tough thing because it doesn't equal a spike in sales. It doesn't give you that kind of instant hit that we all like to get. But what it is about creating consistency. And people really, really get driven by consistency. I think at Koto, we like to say that trust is repeated interactions. It's really interesting to understand. The more you meet someone, the more you get to know them, the more you trust them. And brands are no different. The more we interact with them, the more we trust them. We want to drive awareness. We want people to understand who we are and what we're trying to communicate to the world. And we want to think about things being long-term growth. I think this is a piece from a book that came out about 10 years ago called The Long and Short of It. And in that, they talk about the fact that sales activation will give you this little spike, but then it will go back down. Whereas brand building is about slowly building your way up so that you can get that kind of top of market position. Because brand building on the left-hand side is long-term. You're influencing future sales rather than things today. You're emotionally priming people so that they have a relationship with your brand, so you build that trust. You're building focus, and you're creating that brand equity. And so there's a really interesting definition for people to think about, particularly if they work in the marketing space there. We like to think about our work being active, and so what we've included through this is some things to consider. So I think the first thing to say here is that a great product is not enough. And we've met a lot of founders and a lot of people that have got brilliant products, but unless you tell the story around that product, then maybe it will just stay a great product that no one knows about. Lots of people have good social response, and that's great, but likes don't equal a strong brand. You know, what happens on social media doesn't necessarily reflect the life cycle of your brand and how you think about it. And finally, a really important one is you're not always the customer. I think what we find with a lot of founders and startups is they're started by people that are very passionate about a particular area. And that's great because they have insight, they have a belief, they have all these things. But it's very possible that they might see the world very differently from the customers they want to attract. And so trying to find that customer mindset is absolutely vital. I think it's also really important to talk about the fact that even though as a company we're very responsible for making visually strong brands that have a real visual signature to them, a brand is so much more than how it looks. I think one of the most important aspects of our job when we work with clients is we like to discuss and dissect and really get into the structure of how brands are made and how we're going to really build the science that sits behind it. For us, being strategic is a very vital part of our process, and we think that a brand strategy should connect what a business is doing with why someone should care. And it's really important to think about how those two things interact and how we're going to bring them together. So some examples of some people that we've worked with. On the left, We're very conscious with Airbnb when we work with them that it's not about staying in a stranger's home. That would feel a bit weird if you presented that to someone who'd never heard of Airbnb. You're going to go and stay in a stranger's home, but don't worry, you'll sleep fine. You talk about belonging. You talk about this feeling of what it feels like to go somewhere, to live like a local, to have that experience, to really understand the culture, to be welcomed. When we work with Venmo, they don't talk about social payments. They talk about shared experiences. They talk about the way that the product connects people around those moments where we love to spend together. When we wrote Peloton's brand strategy, we weren't talking about a bike sat in your spare bedroom. We're talking about uniting the world through fitness, this feeling of collectiveness, this feeling of improving yourself and betterment. If I look at some brands that we have had nothing to do but do the similar thing, Stripe don't talk about back to B2B payments. They talk about being the payment infrastructure of the internet. They have a very, very grand vision. MailChimp, emails, boring, right? No, they talk about growing your way. Slack, they don't talk about messaging at work. They talk about teamwork and getting stuff done together. We could continue all day long and show a number of great brands that follow this approach. For us personally, the way that we approach this is we like to think of a brand idea that sits at the middle of a brand, something that everybody in the whole company can think about. It's really important that branding shouldn't just be the regard of the marketing team, but the whole company should buy into it. Brand ideas that we've done in the past and we think about on this screen here, and I think the important thing here is what we're looking for is we go back to that true, compelling, distinctive. We're trying to find that truth that exists in a company. We're trying to find something that feels compelling. So in the bottom right corner, that's one for Meatable, which is a cell-based meat company based out of the Netherlands. For them, they're trying to create this idea of the new natural, this feeling of the fact that we can replace the consumption of meat and the impact that that has on Earth with something that we, as consumers, become completely comfortable to eat with. That's a 20-year journey. That's a massive amount of change that needs to happen. But branding is a really important part of that. It's about helping people find that trust. We have 4 things that we're looking for when we're trying to find a brand idea. The first thing, that it's rooted in truth. We're not inventing things out of thin air. We're not trying to create that kind of fictitious version. It elevates something that's true about the business. It's differentiated in the category. We want to capture a sentiment that resonates with customers. We want to understand our customers, both existing and potential. As Sophie talked about, emotion. It's in our name, Koto. We're really interested in how you get people to be emotional. I think, there's maybe a popular misconception that B2C is emotional and B2B is rational. Everyone's emotional. Everyone has an emotional response to everything. The first 10, 15 seconds of every person we meet, every message we read, everything we consume is an emotional response. And finally, creatively inspiring. If there's 7 or 8 people that are doing the same as you, creativity is the differentiating factor which is going to make you stand out. That's obviously brought to life by some bigger pieces. So we have a vision, the reason why you exist, the thing that you want to present to the world, and then a mission, which is the more practical partner, really trying to understand what your team's doing today. There's lots of different ways of approaching this stuff, but ultimately what I'm trying to do here is talk about this navigation, how we find our way through. What a brand idea isn't for us, it isn't an external piece of copy. It's not something that we're trying to kind of be clever with. It's not just do it. We're not trying to make this piece. I think, Nike and Apple have great brands, but they're their brands. They're not our brand. We need to make our own brand, and it's hard to make your own thing and to kind of find that. We all want to be like greats. I have that feeling as well. But what we're trying to do is we're trying to find that unique space. I passionately believe that every brand has a story. It doesn't matter whether you're making springs for beds or whether you're making life-changing technology that's going to change the face of the world. There's a story that exists in that. There's the founding team. There's the reason you get out of bed every morning. There's the fact that you think about it in the shower. All of those things can be collated by us as the outside partner to help turn that story into something that makes people interested. We should never set out to copy others. We can be influenced by them. We can explain why we like them. We can talk about them. We can dissect it. We can think about it. But we don't want to make a poor copy of someone else. And as I said, B2B is still a human interaction. So from the getting to know someone through to the strategy that we write together, we always ask people, have you got the right name? And for a lot of people, this can be a little bit controversial. Well, it's my name. Names are important. They're emotional. They're something that means something to me. I've built a relationship with that. But it's always important to check for many reasons. One, could it be better? Could it do more? Could it stand out? Could it feel like something? But also, We need to make sure that we're not kicking a challenge down the road for later on. We're not going to make something that's going to feel like it could cause us problems along the way. We often see some mistakes in this front. The first one is not looking to future markets. A lot of people create a name that resonates really well in a home market. Maybe it's in a local language, maybe it's in something like that. But maybe they then tell us that they have ambition. They want to go to the United States. They want to be big in Asia. And suddenly you have this challenge. People can't say the name. People don't understand the name. People don't have a relationship with it. We've worked with a lot of people who've failed to check their trademarks properly. And they launch in a new market. They suddenly find themselves on the end of a lawsuit, and they can have a problem there. We have a lot of people that let URLs or social handles dictate. They want that .com. They want something super simple. And I understand why that's important. But most people don't directly put URLs in anymore. They use Google, or they search, or Siri, or anything like that. And finally, what happens is if you don't get your name right at the beginning of a business, you can let that name stick, and it can be a hazard for you along the way. We've had some quite interesting things along the way. We had an insult in another language, which was very bad, and no one realized. We've had scandals about similar named companies causing problems. And then we've had a lot of people who have come to us where a larger organization has started legal proceedings, and it's really halted their growth because they were on a trajectory, people knew about them, suddenly they're no longer allowed to use this name. And so whatever stage a startup is at, I think it's always important for whether you're in brand, marketing, product, whichever part you sit on, check your name and make sure that it's going to be okay. There's not many .coms left. This is from a couple of months ago. If you look through these, they're pretty bad. No one really wants to have immaculateless.com. It's not very memorable. Trying to find a .com is expensive, quite difficult. I wouldn't worry about it too much. Prefixes, suffixes, there's many ways around it. Think about creativity again. Think about how you might come around that. So just some things to consider when looking at your name. Linguistic suitability is crucial. Descriptive names can trap you. It can be great what you're doing today, but most tech companies want to scale into new areas and want to try new things. And so if you have a name that exactly says what you do, sometimes you find it hard to escape that. And 67% of people don't input URLs, they use search instead. So you've really got to think about how people interact with your brand. I think the interesting thing here is I'm going to hand over to Dan. So when we've looked at the strategy, we've looked at the naming, we've thought about all the structure that lives behind it, the next thing we always like to do is think about how we're going to bring that to life through the power of images and words.
Cool. So we've talked about all the foundations that you need to sort of set the brand up, all the kind of pitfalls that people sometimes fall into. I'm going to show you a couple of examples of how we've brought all of those elements to life and some really good, clear sort of ways in which you can do that when you're thinking about your brand. So Backmarket is a brand that we worked on a little while ago, and they came to us and their identity looked a little bit like that, kind of flat, not very interesting, didn't really stand out, wasn't compelling in any way, and really was leaving us with the sense of it feeling not very memorable. And if you looked at the space in which they existed, you can see that, again, is a very much a kind of sea of sameness. And how they fitted into that was just exactly the same as everyone else. And for us, that was the opportunity, in a way, to think about who they were, how they could stand out, and how they could differentiate themselves amongst everyone else. But as James just said, you don't just start there and think, okay, we can create a really great new visual brand for them. We have to define who they are. We have to really get to know them and understand what makes them tick, why they started the business in the first place, and really what their purpose is. And so for us, it was really about zoning in on the kind of things that are important to them and thinking about a brand idea. As James said, the brand idea for us is the connection, if you like, between the strategic thinking and the visual and the verbal brand. So what we worked out with these guys was that actually they were very much against, throwing away your tech and just buying new every 5 minutes and making sure that you're replacing it immediately with the latest iPhone or other device you may buy. And so they wanted to free the world from tech obsolescence. So, it's a grand way of saying, let's not throw everything away. There's nothing wrong with the phone that you've got. There's nothing wrong with the laptop that you've got. But they really wanted to believe in this idea of kind of like being different and standing out and doing something that was very much empowered by this sense of change and wanting to be different. And how that kind of manifested itself was this idea of kind of like a circular kind of society, really, where you're redistributing, you're rebelling against the kind of norms that you expect to see in the market. And it gives you that sense of kind of like light rebellion. You know, there's still a kind of e-commerce offer, but that idea that you're here to disrupt what is the norm, what we all expect. And thinking about that from a kind of visual perspective and a verbal perspective was easy to differentiate in a way when you think about how Apple show up, as James just showed us earlier, how Samsung show up, how any sort of e-retailer shows up. Doing something that was really different from them actually wasn't that difficult. What we try and do is create a sense of a personality that can be expressed through all of the visual elements, whether that's motion, graphics, visuals, photography. And actually, once you understand who they are and who they're talking to, it allows you to create this very focused, very kind of unique, true, compelling, distinctive, as James was talking about, kind of focused brand. So thinking about their audience in a much closer way. So what we worked out was that there was lots of people in their market that wanted to do things differently. They wanted to buy things in a different way. You know, there's a sort of sustainability point of view. They didn't want to go in, and we recommended that they didn't go in and sort of greenwash this as a big sustainability platform. That's not going to be the right move for them. But there's an underlying cause, there's an underlying message, which is we can do better by this, we can do better by the planet, we can do better by our wallet. And so the idea of kind of like leaning in a very light way into this sort of protest approach really was something that we focused on. This idea of almost being like a pirate code was something that really resonated with them and the founders. So, you know, we often write a kind of manifesto for people. I won't read this. I'm sure you can read it while I'm rabbiting on. But, you know, writing a manifesto for people is a really nice way of consolidating everything into a page. And I think what you'll see with a lot of our work, hopefully, is that it becomes very memorable, not only externally, but internally for people. You know, that idea that you believe in something and you go to work every day and you can stand in front of it and be honestly kind of proud of what it is that you're doing, and it feels true to you and feels true to your colleagues. And this sense really ran through everything that we did. But ultimately, what we're trying to do is make something that stands out visually and verbally, because that's what the consumer reads straight off the bat, right? That's what they see. And James talked earlier about consistency. Now, in the old days, consistency used to mean, you know, being blue and corporate and very safe and boring. For us, consistency is about getting some really, really strong visual assets and using them consistently, not breaking away from the core elements, particularly in the early days of a new brand. You know, you might spend, you know, 18 months, 2 years working on a brand and developing this kind of new look and feel. You don't want to go to market and start messing with it straight away. And I think one of the traps that people fall into with a new brand is because they're looking at it all day, every day, and they're making stuff, and the internal design team and the marketing team are making stuff with the new brand, they get kind of bored of it more quickly. You've got to put yourself back in the seat of the consumer and understand what they're seeing is fresh to them. You know, you've got new people coming at your brand all the time. So for us, it was about building this really rich emotional brand that kind of works with the brand strategy, the kind of tone of voice, the verbal brand as we call it, works exactly the same way as the visual brand. So all of the components are working really strong together. There's not one lead thing. There's not one really strong visual trope or one really strong tone of voice part. Each thing has got a kind of role to play. And I think for us, thinking about how you can do that, and then over time, we love to have ongoing relationships with people. There are people in this room we've had relationships with for a long time. And actually, at that point, then you're able to start extending the brand out and start to look at it in a different way. And so we've done lots of different campaign work for Back Market, thinking about how you can take those brand elements and inject new life into it, but without really reinventing the wheel. So this is some campaign we worked for Impact. We did some student work, which, you know, takes a different look and feel and sort of evolves the brand identity, but still has the kind of core elements in play, but just gets slightly subverted when you're doing these individual campaigns. So the kind of the vision, the mission for this brand, you know, is going from something that was just fitting in, being forgotten and drowning in that sea of sameness that we showed you. James talked about it earlier. So what did we do? We defined their brand purpose. We elevated what was true, compelling, and distinctive about them. And then ultimately, we got them to a place where they were standing out being different. They were true to themselves. They found that authentic truth that we always like to uncover. So they went from this to this. I think the difference is clear to see. You know, there's lots of attitude, lots of spirit to it. It's immediately recognizable when you walk down the street or you see something online. A lot of consistent assets in the toolkit, but a minimal toolkit. You know, don't make so many bits in the brand identity that you don't know what to do with them. So that was kind of, you know, a really interesting journey, a really complex product in a way. And I think, you know, but sometimes the idea is staring you in the face. So we've recently worked with Bolt. You know, the name has a sort of like spirit to it, an energy to it. Their product itself is all about being shockingly simple and really fast. And so this idea of like immediacy was actually the thing that we really wanted to lean into. This idea became the kind of brand idea. It became this kind of strategic approach. So sometimes you don't need to have a very convoluted brand experience, a really, you know, unusual brand strategy. Sometimes the kind of product experience does lead you to the answer. And I think with Bolt, you know, we're not doing something completely new here. You know, there are other logos. If you saw how this landed on the internet, you will have seen lots of other logos that have lightning bolts in them. We weren't going with them to say you've got something absolutely unique to you. We said you're going to be the very best version of this that there is in the market. So that idea of bringing craft and energy and refinement, James talked about the details, making sure that those small details are consistent and really robust across everything. The way that you do the art direction has to be really unique and true to them. That idea of scale and drama that we brought to it, and that energy that you brought into illustrations, into photography, into the language, into the motion behavior. That consistency really, really rings true across all of the different touch points. We work with them across all of their elements, from the digital experience, how it shows up in the product, how it shows up in social, you know, the way that the cursor looks, the little cuts that you see in the UI, all of those small elements all laddered back up to that idea of shockingly simple and super fast. And so for us, you know, it's one of those projects that is less complex in a way, but the level of craft needs to be really, really heightened. And sometimes, you know, if Tom was here, our brand strategist in London, he would tell you that he often says that a brand is seen as the result. Like, how does it leave people feeling? That is the essence of what a brand is. And I think what was interesting when we were working with our friends at Papaya Global is that actually the end result became the thing that we really focused on. So this idea of the payroll effect was really at the heart of all of the work that we did with the guys there. And actually, interestingly, we've talked about collaboration and working together with teams. We didn't create the brand strategy all on our own for Papaya. They had lots of this work in play already. And so we worked with them, we collaborated with them, we workshopped these ideas, and we led together this idea. And I think lots of the work that we do at Koto is about working together with people to really understand what they need. We're co-creating all the way. And honestly, we really believe in that and we really stand by that. And I think we love to work with the internal teams. We love to work with the marketing teams, the designers. We often integrate ourselves into the studios themselves. And as James says, we're always happy to come away, do the roadshow, meet people face to face. You just can't beat it in terms of like building a really strong relationship with people. And I think if you know anyone at Papaya, hopefully they'll be able to kind of ring true with that story. But we're really proud of the work we did there. We've done lots of projects, as James said, out of Israel. We understand the kind of mentality here. We love to work with you guys. We have the straight talking. We understand the kind of the way that we communicate together, and we're cool with that. Like, we want to cut to the chase and get to the right answer together too. So, some things to consider. We've done these points across the board. So, find that clear space in the market. Make sure that you're creating something that's authentic to you, that's true and compelling and distinctive. You marry the visual and the verbal together. Don't just think this is a visual exercise. We just got to make it look really great. You've got to speak in the same way that the visual is kind of reminding you of. And then that consistency across the board doesn't mean boring. It means consistency, and that builds trust. And that doesn't need to be conservative or kind of tied in any way. So I'm going to talk a little bit now just about how we kind of deliver brands. So this is very much the kind of end of the road in a way. I mean, we love to have ongoing relationships, and I'll talk a bit about that in a moment. But I think what's really important is when we're working with our clients that we don't want to dictate to the teams. We bring people along the journey. We involve people. We integrate ourselves and we guide with a kind of gentle inspiration that is really, really vital in sort of bedding a brand into your business. So we have loads of ways of doing that. We talked about kind of iterative ways of working. We've talked about finding a kind of flexible ways of working with you. We sort of shape our process around you. We have this idea of a no process, which kind of is a bit confusing, but we sort of design the process on our project around what you need. Sometimes, like Papaya, they come to us and they've got, formed ideas of their brand strategy that we want to workshop and work with them on, and so we work around that. And we have loads of collaborative tools. You'll all be familiar with all of these sort of things. We deliver guidelines in Figma all day. We kind of work in Pitch. We work with Dropbox. We always have shared Slack channels wherever possible for that immediacy and that communication that we want to have with you guys. And I think ultimately a good guide doesn't dictate to you, right? A good guide inspires you and really kind of leads you into action in a really positive way. And I think for us, and you'll see this in lots of our work, I guess, the motion is really, really important to us. The behaviors, explaining things in a visual way that means you don't have to keep clicking and keep reading. So shorthand, small, pithy, quick ways of delivering that information is really, really vital. And that is across the board. On this page, you're seeing stuff for Pleo, for Boxy, for WhatsApp. It doesn't really matter. The scale of the business is irrelevant to us. We deliver the same quality, the same kind of results really for all of the clients that we work with. So differentiation, I think, this is something that you will have all encountered in your careers. How do you differentiate with all of the assets in your brand library? And I think for us, we've been taking a lot of time over the last sort of few years to build out our art direction capabilities. We have in-house photographers, in-house animators, in-house illustrators, in-house filmmakers. And I think actually for us, it's a really good way of making sure that we control the whole narrative in a way. We can work with you guys in a very cost-effective way to deliver something really unique from an art direction point of view. There's nothing worse than delivering a really great visual brand from a graphic design point of view, lovely tone of voice, great strategy, and then you buy a load of kind of really sad-looking stock images from a library that just, the trouble with that is that anyone can buy them, right? So there's nothing that's going to be unique to you. You can do things to them, you can edit them, but there's nothing that replaces the power of a really unique bit of art direction. And as you can see on here, a huge variety of styles. The styles are not defined by trends, they're defined by what that brand idea is and how that brand idea really comes to life. Digital experiences are really something we're very passionate about. You saw the slide at the very beginning that said we're at the kind of intersection of brand and digital. We absolutely live this stuff. From the very beginning of a brand project, we're thinking about the end result. We're thinking about the digital integration. We're thinking about accessibility. All of those good things that you need to do later on, we think about them really nice and early. These are the kind of core areas of work that we focus on. Nothing out of the ordinary there, but for us, it's really important to kind of outline things that we're really good at, things that we don't do. So we focus on all those different areas, and I think actually what comes true is we spend a lot of time integrating ourselves with the dev teams, with the kind of brand teams, with your product teams, trying to work out how we can make brand best show up in those digital experiences. This is not about a kind of afterthought where we go, okay, we'll update the logo and try and shoehorn in the brand color. We've really got to think about this stuff early and make sure that wherever your customers are joining your journey, whether that's in product, through social media, through your website itself, you've got to understand that they need to sort of have a very consistent point of view and really rich kind of experience wherever they kind of join. And beyond that, digital is great, but actually, when you think outside of that, where you can go, how people show up, where you go about your daily business, we're always happy to go on that journey, find people where they are. The out-of-home campaign work that we do has largely historically been a build on the brand work that we created. So we create a brand for somebody, at some point they're ready to do a bit of out-of-home or a relaunch campaign. But actually, more and more, we're getting bespoke work that is just campaign. The kind of one on the left there that you can see was a project that we did out of New York for the Washington Post, and I think that was, one of a handful of things that we do now where campaign leads the project rather than brand. But we bring the same sort of level of thinking to it, honestly, the same kind of brand strategy, the same sort of distinctiveness in the visual identity that we bring to any brand work that we create. So, as a sort of overview of those things, don't tell people what to do. Make sure that you're inspiring them with your kind of guidelines, with your guidance. That's what we do. That's what we love to sort of preach. And honestly, in our experience, that's what works really, really well. Invest in art direction. Think about it as a line item early on and think about what the kind of long tail of that is. When you're doing that in the future, there's going to be an ongoing cost, right? It doesn't have to be astronomical. There are ways of doing it that are cost effective if you talk and ask the right questions early on. Making sure that brand and digital experience are as one. They're a unified kind of touch point. Don't think of them separately. You've got to embrace the way that the two things work together, and then take the brand to the people wherever they are, whether that's online or in the real world. These are things that we kind of live by and hopefully give you some guidance in terms of the way that you think about that. That is it from us. We'd love to talk to you. Thank you.